All right, well, the caravan is here at the border. I'm talking specifically about the Tijuana-San Diego border right now. You remember this started to be a big deal on concerns when it first left and entered the southern border of Mexico. I think it was back in March. Well, now it is finally here. It's not the people you think. It's not going the direction you would think. So what now? What happens when all of this presumably hits the fan and come tomorrow sometime? A lot of these immigrants who are leaving hostile territories, they say, want to come into the United States for asylum. Then what? William LaJeunesse is in Tijuana with the very latest. William, what are you saying?
Well, Neil, as you just mentioned, the caravan started out with about 1,500 a month ago at the Guatemala-Mexican border. There are about 340 now here in Tijuana, many inside this building still sleeping, and we're expecting about 200 to claim asylum tomorrow morning at the port of entry. Now, yesterday and today, these immigrants attended legal seminars given by an American lawyer or American lawyers at 4 different locations around town where they were said or told, do you really want to do this? You're likely going to be detained for several months. You're going to be separated from your children, and you're not going to have a lawyer with you during these interviews. Secondly, this caravan has been very symbolic, very visible, if you will, and it represents about just a fraction of the 10,000 Central Americans who are apprehended each month at the border looking for a better life, a job, or fleeing violence.
The drug cartels don't let us live in peace in our country. We had assassination threats from the drug cartels, so that's why we had to leave, because the drug cartels are everywhere.
So this is what the U.S. port of entry at San Diego looks like from the south side, and where we expect these immigrants to gather tomorrow, where they will ask for asylum or at least enter the U.S. Now, what is the U.S. doing to stop them or deter them? Well, it's both rhetorical and real. By law, the U.S. is required to give these individuals a fair hearing and adjudicate all the claims. However, the Homeland Security has said if you lie, you'll be prosecuted. Hire a smuggler, you'll be prosecuted. If you game the system or commit fraud, you'll be prosecuted. They will likely be separated from their children, and they will be detained throughout their adjudication hearing through the immigration courts, which can take months. So tomorrow we expect these individuals to go to a local park where they'll meet some supporters who are coming down from Los Angeles. There'll be a lot of media coverage. It'll be very difficult for police to break them up. And then, as I said, Neil, about 200 we expect will request asylum. We don't know if that will be in an orderly fashion where they'll bang on the fence, if you will, or about 20 to 30 at a time will present themselves to an asylum, not to the asylum officer right there at the port of entry, but something along those lines in an orderly fashion. That was done with the Haitians, as you may recall, a year ago. But Neil, that's kind of the process here from Tijuana. But this is about a third of them we expect will not ask for asylum because they don't want to go through it. Back to you.
All right, William. Well, watch closely. Thank you very, very much. William LaJeunesse is going to be there throughout this whole 24 to 48 hour. Could be an ordeal, maybe not. We'll see. The president has been dead center focused on Mexico even allowing this to happen right now. He tweeted earlier in the week that Mexico, whose laws on immigration are very tough, must stop people from going through Mexico and into the U.S. We may make this a condition of the new NAFTA agreement. Our country cannot accept what is happening. Also, we must get wall funding fast. Now, in the interim, he was pushing more National Guardsmen to be on the border. They are there, or most of them are there right now. The read from all of this, because this includes his district, Republican California Congressman Darrell Issa. Congressman, is this going to get, kind of nerve-wracking? What do you think?
Well, look, I hope that there really is a line in the sand that finally gets drawn. The president is certainly compassionate, and if there are real asylum seekers that have a valid claim and a reason to come to the United States, great. But it's a fraction of these people, and it habitually is. In Guatemala, they're told how to tell these statements about perceived risk. Well, I've been to Guatemala back when they were sending the children a couple years ago. I'm very familiar that, in fact, the Guatemalan government doesn't say that these are real. They pass through Mexico. The nature of asylum is not that you go to where you want to go because you have the best economic opportunity. Asylum is about you flee and then you ask for asylum. Well, they've deliberately passed through over 1,000 miles to get to the United States for an economic opportunity. And to a person, these threats are part of a strategy that American lawyers are advising them right now to do. The vast majority of these asylum claims have no specific threat based on their actions, but rather oh, well, it's a dangerous neighborhood. Well, you know what? We spend money helping countries like Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, and even Mexico fight drug cartels. They need to work with us to fight the drug cartels. But with 200 nations around the world and about 180 of them being poor, we cannot give asylum based on the fact that generally the United States is a better place.
Well, clearly for these asylum seekers, whatever you want to call them, and many are from Honduras, there's been an election there, and they fear the new leader and reprisals on them, so they say. But they could have, to your point, sought, asylum in Mexico. They obviously thought otherwise. What's curious to me, Congressman, is how it is Mexico, which is very tough on its own southern border, green-lighted this group originally when it came in, largely of Hondurans, making it all the way to the United States, and the way they did. I mean, it would have been easier to go through Texas or to the Texas border than all the way to your neck of the woods. What is going on there?
Well, this is selective. Mexico turns back more undocumented people that get to the U.S. They turn far more Guatemalans and Hondurans back in Mexico, whole busloads regularly.
So what's different here? Why are they? Apparently, they've passed at least 4 different friendly checkpoints without so much as, a slowdown in checking paperwork.
Well, and this is one that it should befuddle you when during the same period more were turned back than let through. But these have clearly been let through, and nobody believes for a moment it's based on some specifics about these individuals. Look, these are very tough areas to live in. They do have drug problems and crime problems. But you can't have the fact that some nation is less desirable become a reason for asylum. The United States admits about 1.2 million people a year. A small fraction are for genuine asylum. The majority are family reunification. And that's the interesting thing is you come in on asylum, next thing you know, you want to sponsor other family members. If I told you how many people from various areas of the country, including even India, are always talking about how unfair it is that they got an asylum and now they can't go back and visit their family. And you go, what? But that's the reality is asylum is often a false claim. But let's go to the bigger picture. The president has 3 responsibilities, and one of them clearly is to protect our borders, and he is doing so in spite of the fact that Governor Brown and others are politicizing it. What he is doing at the border is no different than Barack Obama, George W. Bush, or even Bill Clinton did in response to the need for additional capability to protect our borders and to orderly deal with people who are coming, whether claiming asylum or simply sneaking across, or quite frankly, bringing those drugs that when they get here are part of a chain that leads to violence in Honduras.
So what happens is they're all, or a good many of them are going to seek asylum, or they're going to, fill out the paperwork, crossing the border, fill out the paperwork. They're going to go get a court date, a hearing. There could be weeks, months. We had former border agents telling me it could be years off. And then they don't show up. That's the fear, right? And then regardless, they're here.
That's the history, is that a huge part of people who claim these asylums and other reasons on a catch and release basis then use it to stay until they're caught. And if they're caught and deported, they'll try the same thing again in various ways. Here's an important one for us all to understand. My state, California, with its governor and its liberal Democrat legislature, is prohibiting law enforcement from having criminals involved in the drug trafficking deported. That means that, in fact, we in California are allowing the drug trafficking and the criminal activities that make Guatemala and Honduras and Nicaragua more dangerous every day. So, one of the challenges is the president's meeting the same requirement his predecessors did and trying to do the job right. Well, California has politicized it and is making it harder for us to accomplish what this president and every administration wants, which is make our country safe, have an orderly system, be compassionate when appropriate.
All right, Congressman, thank you. We'll watch closely. Good seeing you again.
Thank you.
All right, Darrell Issa, much has been discussed with the North and South Korean leaders, and they seem to have a very friendly, exchange, and each dipping into the other's territory, the man hugs and all that other stuff. And of course, praising Donald Trump for this moment. Very little talked about the Chinese leader that might have paved the way behind a lot of these headlines. No less than President Trump acknowledging him. So why isn't the rest of the media? We're on it. All right. You know, the president has acknowledged that there are other players in this North Korea and South Korea meeting, including the leader of China. Please do not forget, he tweeted, the great help that my good friend President Xi of China has given to the United States, particularly at the border of North Korea. Without him, it would have been a much longer, tougher process. In other words, even this very meeting between the North and South Korean leaders, which was surprisingly friendly and warm and man-hugging and all that stuff. So what's really going on here? Nuclear Showdown author Gordon Chang, former State Department Senior Advisor Christian Whiten. Gordon, to you first. Is it your sense that the Chinese played more of a role than we know?
Well, I think that if you look back 2 years, China's sanctions enforcement much better than it was. But if you look back only 2 months ago, there's been a marked deterioration. So, for instance,
they've been cheating and getting stuff to North Korea.
Yeah, we see North Korean workers in China. That's a violation. Also, you know, when Kim went to Beijing in March of this year, you know, you had all those pictures of the gifts that the Chinese gave to the North Koreans. That's a violation of UN sanctions. That's $394,000 worth of porcelain and jewelry. That's a violation of the luxury goods ban. And what Xi Jinping was saying to Trump was, look, I'm violating your sanctions. What you going to do about it? So I think what Trump is trying to do is push the Chinese back to their older position of actually being helpful. Because the reason why Kim wants to talk to us is because the sanctions really are hurting him. And so therefore, you know, this is the reason.
Even when the Chinese cheat and try to help them out.
Yeah, the Chinese are still better than they were 2 years ago. It's just that we've got to worry about what they've been doing the last couple of months.
Christian, you could make the argument. The president seemed to tip his hand here, and Gordon and I were talking about this during the break in his discussions with Angela Merkel of Germany, when he also, credited the Chinese leader for his help, that he tied the Chinese trade and all of this stuff with tariffs to that. What do you make of that?
I think you're onto something there. You know, you have to remember the president is always negotiating and considers trade a part of national security. And so throwing a compliment out to Xi Jinping bad cop in any given negotiation, and we're preparing to be the bad cop with China. The Section 301 sanctions tariffs that would go into place for China's theft of U.S. intellectual property are still on track. You have Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, U.S. Trade Representative Lighthizer going to Beijing this week, but I highly doubt there's going to be a big breakthrough. So you have that going on, and with Merkel too. The White House is pushing hard on Germany to spend more than the pathetic pittance it does on defense. And the Germans have been slow rolling this, and come May 1st, they may find themselves subject to steel and aluminum tariffs that they've been exempted from so far.
So it could work to his advantage there. That is President Trump's. But Gordon, here's what I don't understand. I could see some agreement being had between the United States and North Korea, but our part's going to be money. We're going to have to give them a lot of money. And I know how that has gone in the past. So, disavow me of my cynical notions.
Yeah, well, you're right to be cynical because the North Koreans have violated denuclearization pledges. They had a denuclearization pledge with South Korea, October 1992. There was the Statement of Principles in September 2005 during the six-party talks. They violated all of them. What's different this time, though, is that the sanctions are hurting. And this is not a question of Kim. Kim will violate every pledge he makes. It's a question of what President Trump will do to utilize American power to push Kim to do what he doesn't want to do. We have the power to do this, Neil. We have the power to do this short of the use of force. Question is whether President Trump will use those elements of national power to make sure we're safe.
You know what? I know we want to build into this because whatever we agree to, that if you're going to agree to denuclearization or watch what you're doing, we're going to have inspectors. I just know how that's gone in places like Iraq and Libya and all of that in the past. Leaving that aside, and back to the money issue here, why doesn't China just fill that role? If they're going to be that country's sugar daddy, as they have been, and if Gordon's right, I have no reason to assume he's not, that they have been cheating on sanctions to help North Korea in the interim, maybe not nearly as much as before, why can't they play that financial role? Why is it on us, the United States, to potentially fork over billions to a butcher, a liar, a cheater, and a killer?
You know, I'm not sure we're going to do that because, as Gordon pointed out, we did that before. In the Clinton administration, we were building reactors, throwing energy assistance, basically cash, at North Korea, and they never delivered the goods. In the Bush administration, which I served, we threw a bunch of food aid, which is easily sold on the black market, converted to cash. We also released some of the funds that they had that were tied up at our request in Macau. I don't think the president is going to do that this time. We may deliver sanctions relief, and then North Korea can resume some of the activities it does to generate cash for the regime. You know, China is in a different position here. They don't have the same interests we do. They probably prefer North Korea not have a nuclear arsenal, but they know it's never going to be used against them. They're probably feeling a little uneasy because the summit between Trump and Kim probably won't happen in Beijing. The president said yesterday it's down to 2 locations. If I had to guess, those would be Malaysia or Mongolia, both of which have relations with North Korea.
What about the demilitarized zone itself, that little narrow pocket there?
I think, you know, we saw, of course, the stroll between the North Korean dictator and the South Korean. I don't think that works for this summit, just the look of it. It's an austere, also to sit down and talk turkey. You know, the president is a showman, and that's a good thing in diplomacy. Pageantry is important in diplomacy, and I think they're going to go for something different. Just a guess.
I had suggested Gordon the Poconos or the Catskills, and that was poo-pooed. But Mar-a-Lago, that'd be beautiful. Yeah. How do you think this is all going to go down?
I think that what Trump will do is essentially there will be a denuclearization agreement. They will disarm. What's going to happen, we'll give them a little bit of money. We'll force China to pony up a lot of cash. We'll recognize North Korea because they want that legitimacy. And there are a lot of reasons to do that. But the most important thing, as Christian says, we're going to force them to give up their weapons. We're going to have a very strict inspections regime. And we're not going to give them too much cash until that happens. And that's absolutely what President Trump is saying. He's saying, I'm not going to let up sanctions until these guys give up their weapons.
All right. Guys, I want to thank you both. We'll be watching that closely. As far as the selection side, I think that's just days away. I can't wait. I'm still going with the Catskills or Poconos. We'll have more to this.
Mar-a-Lago.
Mar-a-Lago. All right, well, he is moving fast. Mike Pompeo, our new Secretary of State, after getting approved in the United States Senate, he's been moving fast and furious right now to bring the Arab Kingdom behind us right now, particularly when it comes to Iran and dealing in Syria. The president is a big fan of more countries in the region doing their part, both with money and troops, and not leaving that burden on us. The president, you might have recalled in that famous speech on the whole Syria situation, that $7 trillion has been spent in the Middle East, and he's of the view that we have little to show for it in this country. So how about all you other countries, particularly in that neck of the woods? Pony up, help out. We'll see what his Secretary of State can be doing there. In the meantime, we had a fascinating discussion a little earlier in the show. Just joined us. You missed a good one, but we have a great guest now to maybe follow up on it. This view among African Americans that the president has sort of thrown right back at them, that what the hell have you got to lose? He kept campaigning on that view that African Americans, minorities in general, have been ill-served by the powers that be in Washington, by big government advocates. And so go to me and see what happens. And now, of course, he talks about record low unemployment rates for African American teenagers, for African Americans in general, for women, Latinos, et cetera. He's got a number of support from rappers and all who agree with that point of view. Not all, but many. I wonder what Missouri's Democratic Congressman Emanuel Cleaver has to say about this. I caught up with him when I was in Washington last week. Good to have him on the phone right now. Congressman, what do you make of that? What he is saying is it shouldn't be a birthright for a party, the Democratic Party in this case, to think it has a lock on minority voters by promising them goodies from the government. And that was it. What do you think?
Well, first, I think that Donald Trump and any president, for that matter, would have a chance to do something that would be helpful to the country, and that is create a political system where African Americans are in both camps. And I think that
well, isn't he saying, sir, that they've been in one camp and it's been ridiculous because they've got little to show for it?
Look, I can do an hour-long speech about Democrats taking African Americans for granted, and I'd have a line behind me of very prominent African Americans who would say amen. What I think the president, the thing that prevents African Americans from connecting with this president has been the things he has said that either he said them out of ignorance or calling an African American woman in Congress an empty wagon, or saying that she said something that she didn't say, and then the Republican leading Miami newspaper comes to her defense and says, "We covered the story. She didn't say that she brought the courthouse to Miami." That's
But if you're a minority congressman, whatever the truth or if some of those claims back and forth, I've heard them too. I guess Kanye West has heard them and still likes the president, still thinks that African Americans might want to consider saying something favorable about the president. Whether you're red or blue, if you're looking at the green he's meaning for the economy, the improving economy, the markets, et cetera. I know everyone is not involved in the markets. I understand that. But that it's obviously having an effect on these unemployment rates. I'm not saying it's all the president's doing. I'm not saying that this is still a spillover from what Barack Obama was doing, but it's very real. It's very constant. The tax cuts and the sharing some of that bonus wealth with workers, et cetera. That's very, very real and tangible, as beneficial to minorities as it is to regular old white Americans, right? So what is wrong with that argument?
Absolutely. If I were an advisor of Donald Trump and wanted to get African Americans to connect with him, and they would, I would have advised him to say, look, I had political differences with Barack Obama, but the African American unemployment rate was going down, and I hope that African Americans are proud of the fact that I've kept it going and even reduced it further. I think that, as an advisor, I would have told him that, and I can assure you that the reaction would have been dramatically different. Do
you think so? Maybe among people like you, I've always said about you, you're very thoughtful and fair on both sides and to both sides. You are, and maybe it's the minister in you. But I also think though that there's a certain crowd, and I guess we see this in both parties, that will not hear anything but the drumbeat of views that they want heard. So if you were to say that to some of your leadership, they would just ignore you and probably punish you.
Well, unfortunately, I do think that there are those who would resent the fact that there was an effort being made. But I can tell you, when African American political leaders get together, inevitably the question arises about the Democratic Party taking us for granted. All I'm saying is that a lot of things can be changed by the way a person speaks, by the dialogue, by the high rising rhetoric that of togetherness and
no, I agree with you on that, but it works both ways, right, Congressman? I know you and I got into this a little bit when we were watching together, but I think if you're going to call the president out on things he's said, why does everything devolve on the other side to saying he's a racist? Or that if you say, I just think that gets old. It's not really fair. I think, in your heart of hearts, it's not fair. Get him on a lot of things if you want, but that just zeroes out the debate to me.
Well, and you're absolutely right. Now, I would not call President Donald Trump a racist. There were things he said in Charlottesville that caused my blood to just blood pressure to rise. And I think that when you call a person a racist, it essentially discontinues the dialogue. I think the president, is insensitive. He may be just insensitive to every human being on the planet. Instead of directing it to black and brown people. But I think we have to be careful about throwing that label, that racist label around, because when you use words to hurt people, those words are also going to cause retreat by that person. Now,
but they're by design, right? They're by design. You hope that if you mention that and an African-American base is hearing that and said, oh, I heard that the president's a racist. I heard that his administration has racist views. It stops even the inclination most human beings have to engage or listen, because they've heard from leaders they heretofore have trusted. Well, we heard the buzz that this guy can't be trusted. He's just doesn't have our interest at heart. So they hear comments like the president saying, what the hell have you got to lose? And have statistics that point to improvement for their, for African Americans in general, but it never gets past go.
Yeah, whatever the president has done, and I think when I was mayor, we were at a U.S. Conference of Mayors meeting, and I warned Mayor Rudy about saying that he was bringing down crime, and the reason is that when it goes up, you're going to have to take the blame if you say you brought it down. And the same thing holds true with the U.S. economy. I'm not sure what President Barack Obama did to bring unemployment down. I'm not sure what President Trump has done to sustain it and reduce it even further. But I do think that there's a way for him to get that message out that would engender some appreciation for what he's doing. And the other thing is, I mean, there are things that the president could say and do that I'm telling you would be impactful. And President George Bush, for example, was well on his way of doing that. And if you look at the black votes he received, it would be easy for you to see that there was some affection toward George Bush. Mm-hmm. I mean, I held hands with George Bush in the White House and prayed with him, and just the two of us in the Oval Office. And
you are a rare bird. No, you're a rare bird, sir, and I've said that in great praise. We just need a little bit more of that. I thank you very much for taking the time. Emmanuel Cleaver, we'll have more after this. Devin Nunes is going to be here, many more. Stick around.
Every day I wake up and I think, who knows what's going to happen? Not only through the day, but in the next hour. We're 24/7 news, but we're really down to the minute. So our job is to cut through the talking points, no matter the party, no matter the ideology, to try to get the bottom line truth of the day. You take a deep breath, you realize you're in the moment, and do your job.
I didn't have any contact with media until after I left the government on the 20th of January. So I don't quite understand, at least what I've read, that somehow I leaked about the dossier.
So let me get, so you didn't leak anything about the dossier to any media?
No, I mean, I talked about it after I left the government, but not during that period, and certainly not between the 6th of January and the 10th when the president-elect himself talked about it.
Or maybe not. Former intelligence chief James Clapper now being accused of, in fact, very much leaking about that infamous Steele dossier and then lying to Congress about it when he shared it with CNN. The president has already tweeted on this. If we have that tweet, guys, I don't physically have it in front of me, but I do want to bring it up with our next guest, Devin Nunes, who chairs that committee. This from the president, chairman, and it's very good to have you. Joins us on the phone. Clapper lied about fraudulent dossier leaks to CNN. Fox News. He is a lying machine who now works for fake news CNN, so obviously not a fan of CNN. All right, now back to you, Chairman. Did he lie? Do you have unequivocal proof he lied?
Well, from the Brett Baer interview the other night, which, by the way, was absolutely excellent, one of the best interviews I've seen in a long time, Neil, we now know that Comey was talking about CNN having this dossier, having this information, wanting to go with it. We directly confronted Mr. Clapper in the interview. We asked him directly if he had talked to Mr. Tapper about it, and he said that he in fact did talk about it. So, I don't know if he forgot has missed the dates, but definitely it's inconsistent. And look, he has some explaining to do. If he did in fact confirm to news media outlets classified information that was briefed to the president-elect in Congress, then we have a problem.
Your report essentially concludes that it's the committee that there was no proof that the president colluded with anybody, that there was no evidence that the Trump campaign, quote, colluded, coordinated, or conspired with the Russian government. But a number of Trump individuals and workers did meet with Russian operatives. And you seem to dismiss those meetings. Why?
Well, I think we take those meetings straight on. So if you're talking about directly about this now that's in the news, all the talk about the Russian lawyer that came to meet in Trump Tower, that met with a few of the Trump campaign folks. We interviewed all the people involved in that meeting. The meeting was only 20 minutes. But what we found more importantly, if you want to talk about people who are directly colluding with Russians, the Russian lawyer who came to visit Trump Tower met with a company called Fusion GPS. Fusion GPS is the company who was paid by the Democrats and the Hillary Clinton campaign to dig up dirt on President Trump. So that firm also worked and represented the Russian lawyer. They met the day before the Trump Tower meeting. They met the day of the Trump Tower meeting. Now, Fusion GPS has testified they didn't talk about anything of the meeting, the 20-minute meeting that occurred at the Trump Tower. Now, look, you'd have to be a fool to believe that here you have a Russian lawyer paying Fusion GPS that they didn't talk about their meeting at Trump Tower. But, look, we don't have – we relied on the testimony from Fusion GPS. They denied it. We can never prove it unless we could interview the Russian lawyer, which my guess is we're never going to be able to do.
But you see what I'm saying here? There's no way of knowing on separate tracks what Bob Mueller is doing. He's been able to seize a number of guilty pleas from former Trump operatives and key members. So we don't know where that is going. We do know that he has put off actions dealing with them for a few weeks. Are we to imply from that, or maybe glean from that, that a Mueller statement or final conclusions could be as little as a few weeks away?
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard for us to know what Mueller is looking at, okay? But we know that, in fact, the people who he has indicted, had absolutely nothing to do with the Trump campaign colluding with Russians. And I just want to say, Neil, just back on this, if you didn't know that somebody's a business person or a Russian lawyer that's connected to oligarchs, if you don't have a basic understanding that likely those people are connected directly to the autocracy, the Putin autocracy in Russia, you're a fool. So Fusion GPS absolutely knows that Russian lawyer is connected. Now, what we don't have, now these are people, this is the Democrats paying Fusion GPS that are then getting information from Russians. The Trump campaign was approached by people, were approached by Russians. So, is it possible that the Russians were trying to make connection into the Trump campaign? Absolutely, but at least they weren't paying them like the Democrats and the Hillary Clinton campaign were doing.
All right, but a number of
operatives
were drawn into this circle. It gets confusing, and you've been very patient with Carter Page and George Papadopoulos and some of these others. We don't know. Maybe Bob Mueller knows. Is it your sense, then, that whatever happens here has now morphed into an investigation of the president and his operations, his business dealings with Russia, that predate long before he even became a candidate for president? I get a sense that this whole investigation has gone far afield from just, Russian meddling to something that is not even remotely about Russian meddling, but just business dealings that go back years, maybe decades.
Well, that's very possible because, look, we spent over a year looking at this. We produced a 250-page report. We interviewed 75 people. We found no collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians. We found lots of approaches, lots of meetings, lots of things that took place. But like I said, all those are very, very fishy. And I think as more information comes to light, you're going to see that the only real connection was there. So now it seems like they've moved off of, when I say there, meaning with the Democrats. So now as you move past this, if you look at the indictments that have come already, they don't appear to have anything to do with the Trump campaign. We've talked to Carter Page and others. I mean, these don't seem like folks that are conspiring with the Russians, nor that they even could. Even the Russians thought that Carter Page was not somebody that was reliable. So the fact that they would use these people to then go after the Trump campaign, then we find out later nothing actually happened. And now you see the direction that Mueller's going, looking at business deals, I think is problematic. But the thing that I've said over and over again, when I supported the Mueller investigation at the beginning, because I thought this was going to be good. Former FBI guy, lawman, is going to see that there's no
we have no idea. All right. Chairman, thank you very, very much. We'll watch it very closely. That investigation ensues. That's the one that matters, the Mueller investigation. We have no idea where it's going, how long it's going. There are certain signs, but beyond that, very little else. We'll have more into this. Or will he or won't he? The president will decide sometime this week, we are told, whether he sticks with that Iran agreement or scratches it and starts from scratch. Allison Barber in Washington at the White House with more. Allison.
Hi, Neil. The president's Secretary of State says the U.S. will likely back out of that deal in the coming weeks unless substantial changes are made.
You asked if we talked about the decision. There's been no decision made. So the team is working, and I'm sure we'll have lots of conversations to deliver what the president has made clear. Absent a substantial fix, absent overcoming the shortcomings, the flaws of the deal, he is unlikely to stay in that deal past this May.
President Trump set a deadline of May 12th to fix what he considers to be a problematic deal. The president met with French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Angela Merkel this past week. France and Germany are signatories on the Iran deal, as is the U.S. France and Germany, they don't want the U.S. to back out of that deal. And when both leaders were here, they said they discussed that with the president. The president sort of left it open-ended at one point, joking with Macron, saying, really, no one knows what I'm going to do on the 12th, except for perhaps President, referring to President Emmanuel Macron. The president of the U.S., President Trump, is set to leave the White House a little later this afternoon. He's heading to Michigan for a campaign rally. Tonight is the annual White House Correspondents' Dinner. The president declined an invitation to attend for the second year in a row. Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders will attend that dinner in his place. Neil?
All right, Allison, thank you very, very much. The president's going to be at a big event tonight, speaking in Michigan, as Ellison said. So he doesn't really want to bow out with a lot of the correspondents. And Saturday Night Live, you ever see Alec Baldwin and the President Trump character he does? The president is not a fan of it. Many in his administration not a fan of it. But an SNL alum not a fan of it, ripping that portrayal, ripping SNL. Another SNL alum, Joe Piscopo, on that after this. You know, this could be a big deal. If you've seen Alec Baldwin doing the president on Saturday Night Live, you get some big laughs. But, you know, a former SNL veteran is saying, you know what, it's a little mean. Rob Schneider criticizing that portrayal, saying that it sets the wrong tone and leaves SNL's biases out there for the world to see. Ben Stein is here on that. Former SNL veteran Joe Piscopo here on that. Joe, did you work with Schneider?
No, he was after me.
Okay.
Everyone was after me. I was on with Abe Lincoln. Woodrow Wilson was
exactly. Yeah, Woodrow loved you.
Funny guy.
What he's saying is that, and there's no doubt now, there's just a meanness to the character, meanness to the approach to the show. Yeah. No soft spot for Donald Trump.
Yeah, I just think everybody's got to lighten up. Rob's great, by the way. Love Rob. But, you know, in regards to SNL, I think that Alec Baldwin is so great that you don't cut that, you know. So I don't mind that he does it. What I would like to see, and I offer this respectfully to the show, they should, how come we don't see Bob Mueller? Or as my friend on the radio says, SpongeBob Mueller, you know? Where is he? No one knows where he is. He's like this mythical creature. You never see Bob. There's a sketch.
Well, they used the comparison, Schneider, the you know, the Dana Carvey with Bush, and it was sort of like a warm but kidding way. And but that's gone here.
Yeah. I don't know. Listen, it's comedy. It's going to be rough. It is. I mean, I did.
You're like Switzerland now.
I am Switzerland. No, listen, I can't stand when people go after where they were from.
No, you're right. You're right. You know, Ben Stein, when you see this sort of thing, you pay much attention to. I mean, that whether comedy gets a little too edgy. You know, what do you think?
I don't think it's funny at all. I don't think Alec Baldwin is funny, and I don't think Saturday Night Live has been funny since Garrett Morris was on about 40 years ago. And I mean, I'm sure Mr. Schneider was extremely funny, but I just don't get what's funny about it at all.
Okay.
With the greatest possible respect.
Sure.
I mean, it's just mean, vicious, nasty, unrelenting, and a effete core of impudent snobs, as Bill Sapphire called them long ago. They just sneer at him, dump all over him. It's endless contempt. I'm sick of seeing this kind of contempt from people in Hollywood who deserve, it seems to me, their own contempt.
You know, as brilliant as Ben Stein is, I love you, Ben, but man, I'm telling you, everybody's got to lighten up. Everybody's got to lighten up.
Ben has to lighten up?
Well, you can't. If you're funny is funny. You put it out there.
Well, he's an economist and a lawyer.
Huh? Yeah.
You get what you get.
You know, but you just got to lighten up and just laugh at
But you find
yourself
that goes a little
bit.
too far. Like, I think, zinging something, and no president likes to be kidded. When I read these press reports years later about John Kennedy thought the press was piling on him, I thought, man, wow. I mean, that's pretty rich. But having said that, I understand people smart at this sort of thing.
Yeah.
But is there something to it? I mean, can you balance it out a little more? Can you say something nice or find an endearing quality? We all have them.
The question is it funny then? Is it edgy then? And maybe not. I mean, I'm.
Well, you don't make. Baldwin makes him always look like a satanic character.
Yeah, I guess so. You know what? I know how much is put into the sketches. I can't be objective here because you have to write that. You have 2 days to write that. You have 48 hours.
And this is the best
you're under the gun. You got to do the makeup. Yeah, well, it's such a tough
Frank
thing
Sinatra.
to do.
Brilliant.
Well,
but Ben Stein, do you think people get their impression of the president via that?
I know that young people do. Young people have no idea of the president whatsoever. Young people have no idea that this is a guy who came out of nowhere, won the election that nobody thought he could win, has kept his promises, has been loyal to his base in a way that nobody else has ever been, no president has ever been before. This is a guy who has big, big plans for the United States of America, has already made progress in North Korea.
Is he a yuckmeister? Can he be a yuckmeister?
This president can draw lots of laughs and also sympathy, and there are people on TV who portray him as a humorous character, but also as a laughable character.
Well, it's funny. To Ben's point, what I would like to see.
We got to be funny.
I'd love to see Donald Trump and Macron together. You couldn't make that up.
Please.
That was great. I wanted to see him.